One of the recurring issues with the self-help and New Age movements is a strong tendency towards generating self-centeredness. Spiritual journeys can be selfish, narcissistic even. We can become so focused on ourselves that we forget that in the end, we are part of a complex web of consciousness and that life is far greater than just us as individuals. The New Age law of attraction philosophy is often guilty of this, and it can result in a kind of spiritual narcissism, where the journey becomes all about what I want for me, and with little self-reflection or attempt to develop a conscious relationship with the mind or ego. In other words, there's no genuine attempt to distinguish the authentic self, the big S self, from the conditioned self, the small s self, small s, ELF, just to have a little bit of fun with it. I discuss these kinds of distinctions in my book, A More Attractive Law of Attraction, if you're interested. Now, many people are aware of the Eastern ideal of awakening, of experiencing oneness. This is sometimes referred to as non-dual experience or non-duality. For the mind, or ego, this awakening sounds great. The way the ego tends to attach itself to this idea is to imagine that it will be sitting on top of the world, above all creation, and I will be in charge. No more loneliness, doubt, or fear. In other words, the mind tends to see enlightenment as an expansion of the ego state, with itself in charge, and in doing so, it sets itself up to avoid any actual self-transcendent awakening experiences, because the latter actually necessitate a diminishment of self, small s, big ELF, or self-identification. Look at me. Now I have become all things. Now I am as one. But more importantly, I am the one. There is a part of the mind, yours and mine, that is just like that. I like to call it the spiritual wanker. Sometimes I've just got to tell it like it is. The related Christ complex is the most narcissistic of all delusional spiritual expressions. Here, the practitioner sees himself or herself as being chosen by God to deliver their great wisdom unto the unwashed, unenlightened masses who are, by definition, beneath him or her. And if they are down there, they are, also by definition, separate. So any thought or experience or person that threatens that delusion has to be ignored or eliminated. After all, there can only be one number one, one chosen one king or queen. However, it's just a matter of time till that delusion crumbles, till the ego falls. Here I'm reminded of one of my favorite poems, Ozymandias, written over 200 years ago by Percy Bysshe Shelley. It details the story of a man who meets a stranger, who in turn tells him a story, namely, that while traversing the desert in some exotic foreign land, he stumbles across the bare remains of a giant and ancient statue, that of a long-dead king. Please now allow me to read this short but profound poem in full. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on those lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." Now, I really love this poem because it suggests the futility of excessive human ambition. In the ancient world, monarchs were often considered to be either deities or at least to be the voice of the divine here on earth. Though Ozymandias is merely a fictional poem, it poignantly mocks the vanity of attempting to perpetuate the ego state. No matter how hard we try, no matter how many lands we conquer, peoples we capture, or monuments to our story that we erect, the hands of time will inevitably wash away our self-told tale, like the lone and level sands slowly eroding Ozymandias' giant statue. It is not in turning our mind story into triumphant reality, and not in elevating ourselves above others, that we awaken from the dream of mind. Instead, it is in releasing our small-s self from that story that we awaken, that we transcend ourself. And only then can we consciously choose a more empowered story to live out in our preferred futures. To exemplify this point, I want to tell you a true and profound story, one shared by Natalie Goldberg, the best-selling author of Writing Down the Bones, an inspiring autobiographical book in which she intimates a writing process. In this story, Goldberg recounts a major life crisis and how she managed to turn it into a great triumph. For anyone who has ever struggled with loss or grief, this story will be deeply meaningful. And it can also offer a profound message which can help us to rise above self-doubt, even as we seek to embody the most noble version of ourselves. Most people don't know it, but before Natalie Goldberg penned the final sentence to her book, and it became a great success, she had a kind of mental breakdown. This crisis had been building ever since her beloved spiritual teacher, Katagiri Roshi, passed away several years prior. As she approached the completion of the book, a great grief over Katagiri's death began to subsume her, along with a debilitating fear of both failure and of success. So great was this anxiety that she stopped all work on writing down the bones for the best part of half a year. Instead, she took up a position as a baker at a local restaurant in Santa Fe. She fell into a self-imposed limbo state. The breakthrough came the way it often does for we fragile human beings, via the shedding of bitter tears. And I quote here directly from a recent edition of that book. She writes, "One day, during a break, I took a walk by the Asakia and I fell down sobbing. And I said, 'Nat, you have to do it for Katagiri. Forget about yourself.' And that gave me the drive to do it. In my mind, I grabbed onto Katagiri and told myself, I'm doing it for him. I have as much insecurity as anybody else, but I don't pay attention to myself so much when I'm in the process of doing something that I really want to. I don't think, Natalie, do you want it? Don't you want it? Because that fear of success and failure stops me. If I think of myself, I get caught in myself, like everyone else. First, my insecurities, then my overblown idea of myself. I swing from one extreme to the other. But if I forget about myself, then I can do it. Don't be thrown off by yourself or anyone else. Let your big mind move forward." Now here we can see that Natalie Goldberg's crisis was disrupting her sense of self. I would like to think of this as her smallest self's chrysalis state, where her ego had cocooned itself off from the world, not yet fully aware of her potential for transformation. Such transformative life phases are, by necessity, highly disturbing and often deeply destabilizing. But unlike the inevitable succession from caterpillar to butterfly we see in nature, with human transformation, our deep psyche must prepare the way. We must be willing at a deep level, or the butterfly cannot emerge and spread its wings. Intentionality, that invisible but powerful creative force, has to be present. And for Natalie Goldberg, it was the seed of love of her spiritual teacher that played the key role. For even as she completed Writing Down the Bones, she experienced an overwhelming sense of love for Katagiri, a love beyond anything she had ever previously felt. Goldberg puts it this way, and I read again. "He had pulled true Natalie out of me. So, big Natalie wanted to do it for Katagiri. And now, what I understand is that big Natalie and big Katagiri were never separate. It was my idea that I was less than him or different from him. Even many years later, long after his death, I was tortured. I lost the great being of my life. He died. The great freedom for me came when I understood that we were never separate and that I was him and he was me. That huge love helped me not to be tossed away. In completing the book, I felt a willingness to step up to the plate. It was my time to stop clinging to myself, to take deeper vows. To take on this writing life and practice was, for me, to realize that I was capable of what Katagiri Roshi was capable of. So, no truly wise woman or man ever diminished the world. When we engage the world through the authentic self, through a genuine spiritual journey, creativity and the art of living become an act of love. And suddenly, it's not about me, because our voice transcends us, to paraphrase U2 frontman Bono. My voice becomes our voice, and something greater is able to speak through us. Wisdom transcends and includes. It invites us forward into consciousness structures and knowings that deepen us, all people and all things, and it deepens our possible futures. That's something worth contemplating. See you again in one of those futures.